back to the rundown. Well, there's a new variable thrown into the simmering conflict between Israel and Hamas. It surrounds the destruction of a tunnel dug under the Gaza Strip and leading into Israel. The Israeli military has confirmed that in its operation to destroy it in Israeli territory, 5 terrorists belonging to Islamic Jihad were killed and are now in Israel's custody.
Some context. In the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, hostages, dead or alive, have come to play a defining role, as have prisoner exchanges. Israel has paid a high price to get its soldiers back, one of the highest back in October of 2011. 1,027 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for captive Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. And for the last 3 years, the families of Hadar Goldin and Oron Shaul have been fighting at home and abroad to get their sons' bodies back. On August 1st, 2014, right in the middle of the war between Israel and Hamas, 23-year-old Lieutenant Hadar Goldin and his commando unit advanced towards one of Hamas's tunnels when a militant emerged and opened fire. The 2 soldiers were killed, captured, and dragged inside. Today, Lieutenant Hadar Goldin's family moved to file a petition in the country's highest court to push the government to move forward in getting their sons' bodies back. Hadar's mother, Leah Goldin, is joining us right here in the studio. Leah, pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for being here. Let's start with the Supreme Court. I know that you have been lobbying the Israeli government, the previous administration in the White House, the UN. What are you hoping to get from the Supreme Court now?
Actually enforcing the implementation, what the cabinet actually decided on January 1st this year. So 11 months ago, eventually they have made a decision to put pressure on Hamas in order to bring back Hadar and Oron from the Hamas. Now, this decision actually was following our ideas to flip the equation. Instead of having, like Gilad Shalit, for the last 30 years, that they were kidnapping soldiers and then Israel had to pay high price for releasing them, this time we have to flip the equation and declare the price for Hamas for having our soldiers and kidnapping them. So it turns for them to be a burden rather than an asset. Now, eventually, the cabinet on last January decided to put pressure on Hamas in terms of looking at the sentenced terrorists in jail and, you know, actually harden a bit on them in terms of not having their families visiting them and other conditions, and also the return of terrorist bodies of terrorists and so forth.
So on that note, and before we get to...
But they decided and never implemented it.
Right, and now you're pushing for them to implement it. So on the same day that you were pushing for that in the Supreme Court, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also spoke out about this. And Netanyahu speaking earlier today about Hadar Goldin and Sergeant Oron Shaul. Here's a little bit of what he had to say.
There is one simple rule for protecting Israel. Whoever tries to attack us, we attack them. The second rule is there are no free gifts. We will bring our boys back home, and there are no free gifts.
So, Leah, when you hear the Israeli Prime Minister making that speech saying, we will bring the boys home, what do you think now, just over 3 years since this happened?
It's 3 years and 4 months that we have been hearing this kind of statements, but there is a big gap between what they say and what they do.
Why? Why do you think that is? Why have they failed to bring them back?
I'm not the one to answer why. For me, the evidence for not doing it means they don't want to do it. So for the last year, we are pushing them. We are struggling for that. We are lobbying for that, whatever you mentioned. So eventually, we had the decision of our government. So now, after almost 11 months, it's about time to enforce them, to implement it. And, you know, it's just from God that we have this incident coincident with the tunnel that we have this opportunity of equality, a tunnel case versus a tunnel case. So this is the right time just to put an end, to put a closure to our suffering, and let us bring our soldiers back to decent burial in Israel.
Leah, there are also those in the government and in the security establishment who say we're in sympathy with you, but to put too much pressure on Hamas might restart hostilities between Hamas and Israel. They might respond by shooting rockets. How do you respond to that argument?
Okay, we've been hearing that for 3 years, almost. But you know what happened since summer when they started, the Hamas, the PA started putting pressure on the Hamas. They turned off the light. They did a lot of sanctions to the Hamas, and nothing happened. So why wouldn't Israel do the same and request the release of the soldiers and at the same opportunity? And on top of everything, when this decision was taken at the cabinet, they had a lot of discussion for half a year with all the experts actually analyzing all these kind of scenarios. And they eventually made this decision based on experts' analysis. So now, no more excuses, no more threats. We, the family of Shaul Aron and Hadar Goldin, will not bring the next missile shooting. We will not be the reason for suffering. I mean, this should be put just as a statement of courage, of Israel fighting to return its soldiers and not leave behind your soldiers according to our military ethos, to our Israeli ethos. I mean, here in Israel we have the People Army. It's not that they recruit the army and get salaries.
Briefly, I want to ask you, the person that was in charge of this within the Israeli government has changed over the last few months. Has anything changed in your situation in terms of what you've heard from the Israeli government or what they are actually doing?
We are not interested in what they say. We are interested in what they do.
And have they done anything differently?
Having this petition submitted, we ask for data. You say you stop visiting their families to visit the terrorists until they return Hadar. Give us numbers, give us names, explain. You let people from Gaza, terrorists, Hamas families, to get healthcare, our treatment, just have to report about it. No, if it's a security issue, report it to the Supreme Court or whatever.
Leah Goldin, thank you very much for being here, for sharing your story and a very tough fight in what is every parent's worst nightmare.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you for joining us.
We're going to go out for a quick break.